From the 13-hour flight mentioned by travelers at Lumiose Station to the room 202 key handed over at Hotel Z, every corner of this city carries intention. Even the Pancham standing near your starter selection watches with knowing eyes. Today, we're looking at the secrets and hidden references tucked inside Pokémon Legends ZA. The small, strange, and overlooked details that show how much is still hidden inside these games. And you can see it clearly in the opening platform where you first arrive. This starting area exists outside of time in a strange way. Travelers speak of airports and long journeys, mentioning that 13-hour flight from somewhere distant. Measuring real-world distances, a 13-hour flight from Paris would land you somewhere in Japan, suggesting your character arrived from Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, or perhaps Kitakami. The detail sits there quietly, never announced, never explained. It simply exists for those who listen carefully to every passing word. The game trusts you to piece together where you might have come from without ever stating it directly. Before you drift off, maybe tap subscribe and tell me where you're watching from tonight. Behind that small revelation lies the knowledge that you can never return to this platform. Try as you might to board that train again, the station will turn you away twice. But persistence yields something unexpected. Push 3 times, and the game relents. You hear the train departing. Your character falls asleep on the bench. When you wake, you're back in Lumiose City, as if the whole journey might have been a dream. The circularity of it feels intentional, like the developers wanted to plant a seed of doubt about what's real and what's memory. Elsewhere in those opening moments, the giant screen near the city entrance delivers its welcome message. The words speak of people and Pokémon living together, of harmony and coexistence. This replaces the traditional professor's greeting that opens every other Pokémon game. Instead of a laboratory filled with devices, you receive your introduction from a billboard. The modernization of that classic moment reflects how Lumiose itself has evolved, how technology now delivers what personal connection once did. Over time, as you move deeper into the city, familiar faces begin to appear. Before you've even left the train, you pass advertisements and posters. One features your rival, suggesting they were already known to you through Team MZ promotional materials. Another shows Canary, the city's beloved content creator. The game assumes you might already be a fan before you've spoken a single word to them. When Naveen later asks if you know who Canary is, the answer feels almost dishonest. Of course you do. You saw their face before you ever set foot in Lumiose proper. The layering of these moments creates a strange familiarity, as if you've lived in this city longer than the game's timeline suggests. The Pokefan, trainers you encounter early in your journey, wears references like badges. Pokeballs dangle from their outfit. An Ultra Ball pattern decorates their hair. But the centerpiece remains the t-shirt depicting a surfing Pikachu. The image calls back to the classic Pokemon trading card, the one that became so iconic it influenced multiple games. In Pokemon Yellow, a minigame existed entirely around teaching Pikachu to surf. In Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, surfing became a core mechanic. The t-shirt doesn't announce its significance. It simply exists as a nod to those who remember when seeing Pikachu on a surfboard felt like discovering hidden treasure. Not far from there, the game offers you a choice that seems genuine until it isn't. You can attempt to select Pancham as your starter. The prompt appears. The Pokemon stands ready, but the game gently pushes you back toward the intended 3 options. It's a joke, a moment of levity that breaks the fourth wall just enough to make you smile. Part of you wishes the game would let you proceed with that choice, turning the journey into something unexpected and difficult. But Pokemon ZA wants you to have one of the proper starters, even if it teases the alternative. In another corner of the opening hours, Hotel Z becomes your temporary home. The room you receive carries the number 202. At first glance, it seems arbitrary, but the number holds meaning in numerology, particularly as an angel number. 202 signifies balance, trust, and walking the right path. It speaks to intuition and inner guidance. These themes connect directly to Zygarde, the Pokemon of balance, the guardian of ecosystems. The number also ties to the concept of angels, which becomes relevant when considering the names and symbolism woven into Lumiose's tower later in the story. The developers could have assigned any room number. They chose one that resonates with the game's deeper themes about harmony and equilibrium. Inside your room, you find a Rotom clock styled to look analog, despite being digital. The aesthetic choice mirrors the game's tension between past and present, between traditional craftsmanship and modern innovation. Lumiose itself exists in this space, rebuilding while honoring history. The Rotom clock becomes a small physical representation of that larger theme. But not every story about design happens inside buildings. Walking the boulevards of Lumiose, posters appear on every corner. Some advertise products, others feature familiar faces. Among them, Valerie stands out. She served as the fairy-type gym leader in Lumiose City during the events of Pokémon X and Y. But Valerie was also a fashion model, and her appearance on Lumiose's advertisement boards makes perfect sense. She represents the intersection of strength and elegance, of battle prowess and artistic expression. An NPC mentions she originally came from Johto, adding another layer to her story. She traveled regions, brought her talent to Kalos, and became both a gym leader and a public figure. The posters don't explain any of this. They simply show her face, trusting that players will remember or discover her significance on their own. Inside the Pokémon Center, a small statue of Lumiose Tower sits on display. But the tower it depicts isn't the current version. The statue shows the gym symbol prominently, referencing a time when Prism Tower functioned as the city's electric-type gym. In Pokémon ZA, the tower no longer serves that purpose. The gym has moved or closed, and the tower's identity has shifted. The statue becomes a memorial to what was, a reminder that even iconic structures evolve with time. Behind that small observation lies a larger truth about how cities change. Lumiose City's redevelopment mirrors the real Haussmann renovations that transformed Paris in the 19th century. Baron Haussmann reshaped the city's medieval streets into the wide boulevards and organized districts that define modern Paris. In Pokémon ZA, Quasartico Inc. leads a similar transformation, expanding wild zones and creating space for humans and Pokémon to coexist more peacefully. The game doesn't lecture about this historical parallel. It simply exists as part of the world's foundation, enriching the experience for those who recognize the inspiration. Scattered throughout the city, manhole covers display Pokémon designs. Some feature Greninja or Pyroar, others resemble Pokeballs. These details draw from Japan's real-world Pokelids initiative, which decorates manholes across multiple cities with Pokemon artwork. The program began as a way to promote tourism and celebrate the franchise. Seeing these covers in Lumiose City creates a bridge between fiction and reality, suggesting that even in this game world, someone decided Pokemon deserved to be immortalized in public infrastructure. Over time, you learn that small touches like these define ZA's approach to world building. The minimap subtly tracks the day-night cycle through a shifting color ring. Blue transitions to red as hours pass. Most players never consciously notice this detail. They simply feel the passage of time as they play. But for those who watch carefully, the ring becomes a tool for timing specific events or understanding how long they've spent exploring a particular district. During a mission where NPCs form a human ladder, jumping backward at the wrong moment triggers special dialogue. Corbeau scolds you for ruining their efforts. It's a tiny interaction, easy to miss, but it shows that the developers anticipated player mischief. They built consequences for disrupting the carefully staged cooperation. Moments like these make the world feel responsive rather than scripted. Elsewhere, the game hides references in clothing and customization options. The Bolton brand appears on certain outfits, specifically worn by Zack during your first promotion match. This brand originated in Pokémon Sword and Shield, marking the first time it appeared in the series. Seeing it in ZA confirms that fashion trends travel between regions, that brands from Galar have made their way to Kalos. Other clothing items reference popular media. A t-shirt bears imagery reminiscent of Full Metal Alchemist and RoboCop. A pullover's design nods to Godzilla versus King Kong. A cap mimics the logo from Jurassic Park. Another pullover references Sharknado. These aren't accidents. The developers deliberately wove pop culture touchstones into the game's aesthetic, creating layers of recognition for players who grew up with these films and shows. If you're still awake halfway through, maybe subscribe before you drift off and tell me what time it is where you're watching from. The museum stands as the crown jewel of ZA's hidden references. Located in the northeastern corner of Lumiose City, the Lumiose Museum appears unmarked on your map. Only players who explore thoroughly will discover its entrance. Citizens standing nearby mention an exhibition focused on the Hisui region, the ancient name for Sinnoh and the setting of Pokémon Legends Arceus. The museum becomes a bridge between the two Legends games, acknowledging the continuity while respecting each title's independence. Stepping inside, the first floor offers glimpses of Kalos history. Paintings reference locations from Pokémon X and Y. One depicts a glittering cave, known for its gemstones and glowing moss. Another shows the Kalos power plant, where Team Flare once staged operations. These aren't elaborate displays. They're simple artworks that reward longtime fans with recognition. The game doesn't explain what these places were. It trusts that you already know or will discover their significance through other means. But the second floor transforms understanding entirely. The Hisui exhibition dominates the upper level, filled with artifacts that tell the story of Pokémon Legends Arceus. Handcrafted Pokeballs from Jubilife Village sit behind glass. Survey Corps uniforms hang on display, complete with descriptions noting how these clothes never seemed to suffer damage, despite their wearers being blasted by Pokémon moves and rolling through dirt. The museum even jokes about how the male protagonist's hat never fell off, no matter how intense the action became. This self-awareness adds warmth to the exhibit, showing that the developers understand the subtle absurdities players noticed while playing Arceus. Nearby, statues of Dialga and Palkia stand tall, their forms matching the ancient depictions from Hisui's legends. Cave paintings become visible in detail for perhaps the first time, showing hieroglyphs that reference the creation trio. Each artifact feels carefully chosen, not just for nostalgia, but to deepen the lore connecting these two games across time and space. In one corner of the exhibit, Volo's outfit rests in a glass case. The merchant-turned-zealot, who sought to overthrow Arceus itself, left behind his ceremonial clothing. An NPC near the display mentions that the person who wore this outfit donated it personally. They also note that this individual gazed at Professor Laventon's sketches with a nostalgic air. The implication becomes clear. Volo survived into the modern day. whether through time travel, immortality, or some other mechanism, remains unexplained. But his presence in ZA's timeline creates questions that may never receive answers. The game plants this seed and moves on, trusting players to wonder about the gaps in the story. Across the room, another display addresses an equally significant mystery. Records describe a man named Ingo who provided guidance in Pokémon battles during Hisui's era. The text explains that he simply vanished one day after stating it was time for him to return. For players who remember Ingo from Pokémon Legends Arceus, this revelation brings relief. The subway boss from Unova, torn from his timeline and stranded in ancient Hisui without most of his memories, eventually found his way home. The museum doesn't explain how. It doesn't detail whether Arceus intervened or if the protagonist helped him. It simply confirms that Ingo's story didn't end in tragedy. He made it back to his brother Emmett and the life he'd lost. An NPC elsewhere in Lumiose mentions wanting to battle both Ingo and Emmett someday, further confirming that Ingo exists in the present timeline. The pieces fit together quietly, without fanfare, in the way that good world building often does. But what of the protagonist from Legends Arceus? The museum displays their uniform alongside other Galaxy Team artifacts. Descriptions mention a mysterious 15-year-old who appeared from nowhere and completed the Pokédex that Professor Laventon had begun. Unlike Ingo, no mention is made of this person returning home. The exhibit describes their achievements, but offers no epilogue about their fate. The silence feels deliberate. While Ingo received closure, the protagonist's story remains open-ended, suggesting they may have remained in Hisui permanently. It's a bittersweet realization, one that casts a shadow over the triumph of completing Legends Arceus. Scattered among the Hisui artifacts, another side quest unfolds. 12 spupa have hidden themselves throughout the museum, blending into exhibits and displays. A couple on the first floor asks for help locating their scattered Pokémon. The first spupa hides behind them near the stairs. The second perches on the information desk. The third sits between two couches on the staircase leading upward. These early finds ease you into the hunt, building confidence before the real challenges begin. On the second floor, the spupa become more creative. One disguises itself among the Pokeball collection display, mimicking the spherical shape so well you might walk past without noticing. Another sits atop the holographic projection of Lumiose City, watching the miniature streets and buildings below. A sixth rests on a couch directly across from the hologram, as if studying the city's layout. Within the Hisui exhibition, the hiding spots grow more elaborate. 2 spupa position themselves on the Survey Corps uniform and equipment cases. A 9th appears on the miniature model of a Hisuian store. The 10th camouflages itself among ancient portraits on the wall, blending into the frames like part of the artwork. An 11th perches atop the Galaxy Team armor, wearing it like a tiny helmet. The final spupa studies the Hisuian hieroglyphs, positioned near the inscriptions, as if trying to decipher their meaning. Completing this quest rewards you with a blue pattern Vivillon, one of the many regional variants available throughout Lumiose. The pattern is locked from the moment you receive the spupa, determined by where in the city or which wild zone it originated from. Collecting all Vivillon patterns becomes its own extended challenge, requiring exploration of every district and zone until you've documented each unique design. Behind these collection challenges lies a philosophy about discovery. Pokémon ZA doesn't announce most of its secrets. It doesn't place quest markers over every hidden interaction or Easter egg. The game rewards curiosity, patience, and thorough exploration. Players who rush through the main story will miss substantial portions of what makes Lumiose special. But those who wander, who speak to every NPC and examine every display, who test boundaries and revisit locations, gradually uncover the depth woven into every corner. The museum's paintings offer another layer of this approach. Several artworks reference real-life masterpieces. The mythical Pokémon Diancie painting reinterprets Johannes Vermeer's girl with a pearl earring, replacing the human subject with a Pokémon while maintaining the composition's iconic gaze and luminous quality. Another painting showing Gothitelle with Pokémon mirrors. Pierre-Auguste Renoir's Madame Georges Charpentier and her children, capturing a similar sense of domestic tranquility and familial connection. A third artwork depicting Tisserina and Cacturne recalls Claude Monet's Woman with a Parasol, using the same play of light and movement to create atmosphere. The Parfum Palace portrait deserves special attention. Originally displayed in Pokémon X and Y's Parfum Palace, this painting depicted the Kalos King's brother alongside a Mew. If you inspected it after defeating the champion in those games, your character would note that the portrait reminded them of AZ. In ZA, the same painting appears in the museum, carrying forward that subtle connection. AZ, the 3,000-year-old king, whose actions triggered the Kalos War and created the ultimate weapon, walks through ZA as the manager of Hotel Z. His presence ties the distant past to the present, showing how guilt and redemption can span millennia. AZ's story interweaves with the game's deepest mysteries. 3,000 years ago, AZ built the ultimate weapon to resurrect his beloved Floette after it died in war. The weapon succeeded, but required draining the life energy of countless Pokémon. Floette, horrified by what AZ had done in her name, left him. AZ spent 3 millennia searching for forgiveness, his body sustained by the weapon's residual energy. In X and Y, you finally reunite them after stopping Team Flare from repeating AZ's mistake. ZA reveals that AZ designed Hotel Z as his final residence, suggesting he knew his long life was ending. He passes away during the game's events, having finally found peace after Floette's return somehow made him mortal again. The eternal flower, Floette itself, carries secrets within secrets. Its Pokédex entry describes it as holding a plant that died out in ancient times, suggesting the flower represents an extinct species. This rare Floette harbors incredible power that becomes more explicit in its Mega Evolution. When Mega evolved, the eternal flower absorbs all the energy from the transformation. The Pokédex notes that the flower now attacks enemies on its own, independent of Floette's will. This mirrors Slowbro's Mega Evolution entry, where the shelter attached to its tail is what actually Mega evolves rather than Slowbro itself. The implication becomes clear. The Eternal Flower isn't just a flower, it's a Pokémon in its own right, or perhaps something that evolved beyond traditional categories. The boss battle at the game's climax features this flower as a separate entity, attacking with devastating force while Floette watches helplessly. The question of what species this flower belongs to remains unanswered, another thread left dangling for future games to potentially explore. Lysandra's return adds another dimension to these intertwining narratives. The former Team Flare boss now goes by the name L, having survived the destruction of his laboratory 3,000 years into his own unnatural lifespan. One of his eyes has whitened, possibly indicating blindness or some other consequence of his extended existence. This mirrors AZ's covered eye and connects to Chandeler's new Mega Evolution, where only one of the chandelier's flames remains lit while the other looks into the afterlife. The symbolism runs deep, suggesting that those who extend life beyond its natural limits begin to exist partially in death's realm. A side quest involving Litwick explores this theme more explicitly. Litwick's flames absorb life energy from people and Pokémon, making them small-scale versions of the ultimate weapon's horror. A child disappears with their Litwick, and their sibling fears the worst, having heard stories about life force being drained. The quest resolves peacefully, but the parallel to AZ and Lysandra's situations remains. The game asks quietly whether any tool that manipulates life and death can ever be used ethically, even when wielded by adorable ghost-type Pokémon. Team Flare's legacy persists throughout Lumiose in unexpected ways. Lysandra's cafe remains as a ruined shell, a memorial to his failure. The windows are boarded up, but gaps between the boards allow glimpses inside. Overturned chairs sit where they fell. Dust covers tables that once hosted Team Flare meetings, disguised as social gatherings. The espresso machine, state-of-the-art when installed, now corrodes in the darkness. Everything remained exactly as it was on the day Lysandra activated the ultimate weapon, as if the city decided this space should serve as a reminder rather than be cleaned and repurposed. Inside the old laboratory, accessible through side quests, the scale of Lysandra's ambition becomes clearer. Whiteboards display doodles of Generation 1's party icons, cute tributes to Red and Blue's interface that feel jarring in this context. These weren't drawn recently. They've been there for years, suggesting Team Flare recruited scientists and programmers who grew up loving Pokémon, who may not have fully understood what they were contributing to until too late. The drawings humanize people who participated in terrible plans, complicating the narrative of simple villainy. Elsewhere in the lab, mock-ups of Unova-era battle robots from movie tie-ins appear on design tables. Lysandra studied technologies from multiple regions, seeking any innovation that might further his goals. The robots never moved beyond planning stages, but their presence shows how thorough his research was, how many different approaches he considered before settling on the ultimate weapon's life-draining methodology. Computer terminals throughout the facility contain fragmentary data. Most files were deleted or corrupted when Team Flare collapsed. But patient players who examine in every screen can piece together timelines, identify which scientists worked on which projects, understand the organizational structure that enabled Lysandra's plans. One particularly chilling document discusses acceptable losses in test phases, clinical language masking the reality that Pokémon suffered during the Mega Evolution experiments gone wrong. Another file references something called Project Eternal, separate from the ultimate weapon, but related to life extension research. The details are sparse, but it seems Lysandra wasn't content merely to reshape the world. He wanted to ensure he'd live long enough to guide whatever came after. Whether this research succeeded, or whether his current immortality stems from the ultimate weapon's residual energy, remains unclear. The game plants questions without providing definitive answers. Mabel, once a Team Flare scientist, now serves as acting director of the Pokémon Research Lab. When you first meet her, she seems professional and reformed, focused entirely on legitimate research. But as you complete quests for her, cracks appear in this facade. She references old experiments with troubling enthusiasm. She asks you to retrieve items from Lysandra's lab with urgency that seems excessive for purely historical interest. She never explicitly states she misses Team Flare, but her body language and careful word choices suggest complicated feelings about that period of her life. She's the one who gave players the elevator key in Pokémon X and Y, and in ZA she asks trainers to search for that same key while exploring the ruined laboratory. When you find it and return it, she holds the key for a long moment before thanking you. Later, You might spot her standing outside the old cafe at night, just watching the building. She never enters, she simply stands there, then leaves. These moments aren't quest triggers or story beats, they're environmental storytelling about a person caught between past and future. Through her research lab, Mabel studies mega evolution from scientific perspectives that complement the museum's historical approach. She explains how megastones formed through ancient energy concentrations, how keystones resonate with trainer emotions, why some species can mega evolve while others cannot. Her explanations help players understand mechanics while adding lore. But she also mentions research avenues she can't pursue due to ethical concerns, studies that would require methods too similar to Team Flair's approach. The line between advancing knowledge and repeating atrocities remains uncomfortably thin. Emma, the young girl from X and Y who wore the high-tech suit that transformed her into Essentia, returns as Lumiose's detective. The transformation from homeless girl to law enforcement represents remarkable personal growth. But conversations with her reveal the journey wasn't easy. She discusses nightmares about the suit, about being controlled, about things she did while someone else pulled the strings. Becoming a detective gave her agency, let her choose who she protects instead of being forced to threaten people. When you first meet Emma, she runs using the Naruto run animation, arms back and torso forward. It's a playful anime reference that stands out from the game's otherwise grounded movement styles. Blink, and you might miss it, but spotting that detail adds personality to a character who otherwise presents herself seriously. Later interactions show other quirks, brief moments where her professional demeanor slips and the enthusiastic girl underneath shows through. Her detective work focuses on petty crime and missing Pokémon cases rather than major investigations. She helps citizens find lost partners, resolves disputes between neighbors about property boundaries, ensures street vendors have proper permits. These mundane responsibilities suit her perfectly. She's spent years vulnerable and overlooked. Now she protects others in similar positions, ensuring Lumiose's transformation benefits everyone rather than just the wealthy and powerful. One quest involves helping Emma solve a case about mysterious graffiti appearing throughout the Southern District. The tags feature stylized Pokémon and cryptic messages. Emma suspects gang activity or vandalism, but investigation reveals the artist is a former Team Flare grunt, now anonymous, using art to process guilt about past actions. The messages encode apologies to specific people harmed by Team Flare operations. Emma must decide whether to arrest the vandal or acknowledge the art serves a therapeutic purpose that benefits both the artist and the victims who receive these indirect acknowledgments. Her decision depends on a player input during conversations. You can encourage strict law enforcement or suggest compassion might serve justice better. Emma listens to your perspective, but makes her own choice, showing she values your friendship without being controlled by it. Whichever path she chooses, the outcome feels earned, consistent with her character, while allowing room for player influence on her development. Two other ex-Team Flare members, Grisham and Grizel, have reformed into baristas running a small cafe. The establishment sits in a quiet corner of the Eastern District, easy to miss if you don't explore thoroughly. Their coffee has a reputation among NPCs for being exceptional, unusually strong, and carefully prepared. Some customers don't realize the barista's past affiliation. Others know and come specifically to support their rehabilitation. Grisham and Grizel appear throughout the city at different times, suggesting they operate a mobile cart in addition to their permanent location. They serve coffee at construction sites in the morning, in parks during afternoon, near offices during evening breaks. This mobility lets them interact with diverse populations, building relationships across Lumiose's social strata. The game never explains whether this itinerancy serves business purposes or represents inability to stay in one place, restlessness from people trying to outrun their histories. When they battle, they still strike the iconic Team Flare pose they used during their time with the organization. Arms raised, backs straight, synchronized movements that look ridiculous, yet somehow intimidating. Once Team Flare, always Team Flare, as the saying goes. Their inability or unwillingness to fully abandon that identity suggests how deeply indoctrination can shape someone, even after they've left the group behind and rejected its ideology. But their Pokemon teams have changed completely. During Team Flare's operation, members used Pokemon selected for intimidation and power. Grisham and Grizel now partner with species known for gentleness and cooperation. Their Pokemon seem happy, well treated, comfortable in their presence. The contrast between the aggressive pose and the caring relationships tells a story about people who can't fully escape their past but refuse to let it define their present. Conversations with them reveal careful boundaries about what they'll discuss. They'll explain how they brew coffee, recommend beans, share recipes. They'll talk about Lumiose's neighborhoods, suggest places to visit, describe their favorite customers. But ask about Team Flare, and they redirect. Not rudely, but firmly. That chapter is closed. They won't pretend it didn't happen, but they won't analyze or justify it either. They're simply trying to live differently now. Late in the game, a side quest involves them more directly. A former Team Flare member, still committed to Lysandra's vision, tries to recruit Grisham and Grizel back into reorganizing the group. The scene plays out in their cafe after hours. You arrive to find them listening to the recruiter's pitch, their expressions unreadable. The tension suggests genuine uncertainty, that some part of them might be tempted by the familiarity of belonging to something larger than themselves. Your arrival interrupts the moment. The recruiter flees. Grisham and Grizel thank you for the interruption, but won't explain what you witnessed. Later, through other NPCs, you hear that the recruiter left Lumiose entirely, and that someone matching Grisham and Grizel's description was seen speaking with Emma. The implication is clear. They reported the recruitment attempt rather than being swayed by it, choosing their new lives over nostalgia for purpose they'd found in Team Flare. These character arcs about reformation and redemption run throughout ZA. The game acknowledges that people make terrible choices, cause real harm, and must live with consequences. But it also suggests that change remains possible, that past actions don't completely determine future potential. The balance between accountability and compassion never tips fully either direction. Justice and mercy coexist in tension, as they do in real ethical decision-making. In another district, NPCs reference characters and events from X and Y with casual familiarity that makes Kalos feel like a living region where stories continue. Someone asks about what happened to Dexio and Sina, Professor Sycamore's assistants who helped players in the previous Kalos games. They were researchers studying mega evolution, enthusiastic young scientists caught up in the excitement of documenting a phenomenon that redefined battle dynamics. An NPC mentions hearing they've moved to Alola, that they're researching Z moves now, trying to understand how different regions develop different power amplification mechanics. The information feels natural, like gossip between colleagues, rather than exposition dumped for player benefit. Another NPC mentions that Cybold left the Elite Four to hone his culinary skills. Cybold specialized in water-type Pokemon, but always maintained that his true passion lay in cooking. He viewed battling and cuisine as related arts, both requiring creativity, precision, and understanding of how individual components combine into greater wholes. His decision to pursue cooking full-time surprised some, but made perfect sense to those who knew him. a receptionist at hotel. Richissimi adds that the hotel's chef was once Siebold's star pupil, confirming that he succeeded in building a culinary legacy that may outlast his battling reputation. This information comes up naturally when ordering food at the hotel's restaurant. The receptionist mentions it with obvious pride, honored that their establishment employs someone trained by a former Elite Four member. The game trusts you to remember who Siebold was, or to research him if his name sounds familiar. It doesn't pause to explain his significance, maintaining conversational flow over encyclopedic completeness. Near Prism Tower, an NPC discusses the tower's history and the siblings who once ran the gym there. Clement served as the electric-type gym leader in X and Y, while his younger sister Bonnie acted as the quizmaster. The NPC reminisces about how the gym hosted both Pokémon battles and challenging quizzes, testing trainers' knowledge alongside their combat skills. Some trainers found the quizzes more difficult than the battles. The NPC laughs, particularly questions about circuit design and electrical engineering that reflected Clement's inventor background. Now the tower serves a different purpose, and the gym has closed or relocated. The change reflects Lumiose's ongoing transformation, or even institutions that seemed permanent eventually evolve or fade. The NPC doesn't sound sad exactly, more nostalgic, acknowledging that change brings loss even when it also brings progress. They wonder where Clement and Bonnie went, whether they're still in Kalos or traveled to other regions. The game never answers these questions, leaving their fate ambiguous like so many other characters from previous games. On South Boulevard, an NPC comments that fewer people roller skate these days. This references the roller skating feature in Pokémon X and Y, where players could zip through Lumiose's streets on skates, performing tricks and accessing areas unreachable by walking. ZA replaces that mechanic with Lumicabs, modernizing transportation while acknowledging what was lost. The NPC sighs when discussing this, mentions how the city felt more dynamic when everyone skated, how it forced people to pay attention to their surroundings rather than passively riding in vehicles. But another NPC counters this nostalgia, pointing out that skating was dangerous, that accidents happened regularly, that not everyone had the balance or mobility to skate safely. The cabs provide accessibility, they argue, letting elderly citizens and those with disabilities navigate Lumiose as easily as athletic young people. Both perspectives hold validity. The game presents them without declaring a winner, showing how progress involves trade-offs rather than pure improvement. Another NPC mentions the Go-Goat shuttle service that operated in X and Y, carrying players between districts on the backs of large grass-type Pokémon. That service no longer runs, replaced by more efficient, but less charming alternatives. A Go-Goat breeder in the Western District explains that maintaining the shuttle became unsustainable as Lumiose grew. The Go-Goat couldn't keep pace with population increase. Routes became too long for the Pokémon to handle comfortably. Insurance costs rose after several accidents. Eventually, the service closed, and the Go-Goat retired to more peaceful work, pulling small carts in parks and gardens. The breeder clearly loved the shuttle system, considers its end a tragedy of modernization. But they also acknowledge the Go-Goats seem happier now, less stressed, enjoying work that suits their temperaments better than shuttling thousands of strangers daily. Progress brings convenience, but sometimes costs personality. Yet the transition might benefit those we thought we were helping by resisting change. These conversations about lost features and changed systems create melancholy running through ZA. The game celebrates Lumiose's transformation while mourning what disappeared in the process. Every gain comes with loss. Every improvement eliminates something that mattered to someone. The developers avoid simplistic narratives about change being uniformly good or bad, instead presenting complexity that mirrors real urban development. Deeper into the city, references become more subtle and require greater attention to notice. A painting in the museum depicts locations from X and Y. When investigated, descriptions mention roller skating, the feature players used to explore these areas in the previous games. The text reads like a travel guide, written by someone with fond memories, describing the sensation of skating through these spaces, the wind in your hair, the freedom of movement. Reading it creates nostalgia for a mechanic that no longer exists, making you feel the loss even if you never played X and Y. Another painting shows Callum, the male protagonist option from X and Y, positioned in the Tower of Mastery section. His inclusion suggests he went on to study mega evolution after his journey ended, perhaps becoming a researcher or trainer who specialized in that phenomenon. An NPC near the painting mentions that the subject achieved great things, that they became a champion who helped prevent catastrophe, but they're referenced by title rather than name, maintaining the tradition of player characters existing ambiguously in later games' timelines. An exhibit discusses the first Megastone and Keystone, stating they were found north of Lumiose City, according to Kalos tradition. The display presents this as historical fact, complete with diagrams showing the discovery location and descriptions of the stone's properties. Everything appears authoritative, supported by research and documentation. But an NPC on North Boulevard adds a crucial detail that complicates this narrative. They mention, almost casually, that the first mega evolution actually happened in Hoenn, referencing Rayquaza's ability to mega evolve without requiring a megastone. This correction matters because it shows the museum's information, while generally accurate, contains gaps and misconceptions. History gets simplified in exhibits. The full truth requires speaking to people who studied the subject more thoroughly, who looked beyond their region's claims to understand global patterns. This revelation opens questions about mega evolution's true origins. If Rayquaza could mega evolve naturally in ancient Hoenn, does that mean the phenomenon existed long before humans formalized it through megastones? Did ancient people witness mega evolution and create stones trying to replicate what they'd seen? Or did Rayquaza develop its unique method by observing humans and adapting the principle without needing artificial tools? The game never settles these debates. Different NPCs offer different theories, each supported by evidence but none definitively proven. The museum presents Kalos's version because museums inevitably reflect regional perspectives. Truth becomes complicated when viewed across time and geography, when different cultures encounter the same phenomena and interpret them through their own frameworks. The museum addresses this limitation in other ways too, through exhibits that explicitly acknowledged uncertainty. Displays describing Hisui note that while Professor Laventon began the Pokédex, a mysterious 15-year-old completed it. The exhibit doesn't claim to know everything about this person. It presents what records show and admits gaps exist. Multiple displays reference Ingo's training methods and his sudden disappearance, but they frame these as historical mysteries rather than known facts. The information presented comes from artifacts and partial records, piecing together what happened from fragments rather than complete narratives. This approach mirrors real-world historiography, where understanding the past means interpreting incomplete evidence, acknowledging uncertainty, resisting the temptation to fill gaps with speculation presented as fact. ZA treats its own lore the same way, showing that even in a Pokémon game world, perfect knowledge remains elusive. Some questions lack answers. Some answers generate new questions. Understanding grows, but never reaches completion. One exhibit features pottery shards from ancient Kalos, decorated with images that might represent early mega evolution. The patterns show Pokémon in two forms, one normal and one larger or more elaborate. Scholars debate whether these represent mega evolution, regular evolution, or simply artistic exaggeration. The exhibit presents all three interpretations without declaring any correct, inviting viewers to form their own conclusions. Adjacent to this display, another case contains crystals that might be proto-megastones. They share chemical composition with modern megastones, but lack the refinement that enables current usage. Did ancient people find these crystals and refine them? Did natural processes create modern megastones through geological time? Or are these crystals unrelated, their similarity to megastones coincidental? Again, multiple theories coexist without resolution. This scholarly approach to world building creates depth without requiring players to memorize extensive lore. You can engage with these questions or ignore them entirely. ZA works as an adventure game, whether you read museum placards thoroughly or skip them completely. But for players who enjoy theoretical discussions, the game provides ammunition for conversations that can last hours. Walking between districts, these observations accumulate into understanding of Lumiose as a place where history and present intersect constantly. You encounter a young boy named Pikami in a Lumiose City park. He wears a blue vest and jeans with a red beanie, an outfit close enough to Ash Ketchum's iconic look to spark recognition. His appearance and mannerisms mirror the anime protagonist. He stands with confident posture, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. When approached, Pikami immediately challenges you to a battle, insisting he has the world's greatest Pikachu. The reference feels both obvious and subtle, close enough to evoke recognition without explicitly naming Ash. His Pikachu is genuinely powerful, higher level than most wild encounters in that area, with a moveset suggesting careful training. Beating him requires strategy rather than just overwhelming force. After the battle, win or lose, Pikami declares this was the best match he's ever had, that battling you made him want to train even harder. His determination and positive attitude capture Ash's essential character, making the homage feel respectful rather than mocking. The encounter gains additional weight when you consider the broader context. Ash represented a generation's introduction to Pokémon. For 25 years, he traveled regions, made friends, caught Pokémon, and inspired countless players to begin their own journeys. His story concluded with his retirement from the anime, passing the protagonist role to new characters. Finding an echo of him in ZA, even just a child who shares his enthusiasm and confidence, creates continuity between the anime's history and the game's present. It's a gentle acknowledgement that while Ash's journey ended, the spirit he embodied continues in new trainers. Pikami isn't Ash. He's someone inspired by the same ideals, walking a similar path, carrying forward that legacy of enthusiasm and friendship with Pokémon. The game honors the past without being bound by it, showing how influence ripples across generations. Not far from that encounter, you can participate in sky battles through a side mission discovered by talking to a traveler near the western wild zones. This NPC expresses how much he misses sky battles, the specialized format that originally appeared in Pokémon X and Y. Those battles allowed only flying-type Pokémon to participate, taking place on cliffs or in open air where grounded species couldn't reach. The format felt fresh and dynamic, forcing players to build teams around type restrictions while appreciating how battle environments shape strategy. The competitive scene receives its own set of references through the ZA Royale matches. These ranked promotion battles begin at rank Z and progress upward toward rank A. Each rank features a specific opponent with carefully chosen Pokémon. At rank W, you face Rentaro the Waiter, who brings 3 Pokémon into battle. Simisear, Simisage, and Simipour, the evolved forms of the elemental monkey trio from Pokémon Black and White. These Pokémon originally belonged to the Striaton City Gym triplets, Chili, Ceylon, and Cress. Each brother battled with the unevolved form, and players faced whichever brother countered their starter's type. In Black 2 and White 2, the brothers' monkeys had evolved, and they expressed desire to be seen as individuals rather than always a group together. Rintaro's team serves as tribute to these characters. His 3 Pokémon are level 24. In Black and White, the triplets' monkeys were level 14, exactly 10 levels lower. Rintaro's name contains a play on the trio's Japanese naming convention. His waiter profession directly mirrors their roles. The reference runs deep for those familiar with Generation 5, while remaining accessible to newer players who simply see a challenging battle with balanced type coverage. Other ZA Royale opponents carry subtler references. Zack, the rank Z challenger, works as a driver, possibly referencing the Pokémon trainer class of the same name from X and Y. Canary, encountered at rank F, resembles Iono from Scarlet and Violet in both appearance and personality. These aren't exact matches, but the design language feels deliberate, creating bridges between ZA and other games in the franchise. NPCs throughout Lumiose mention Galar frequently, particularly Leon. These references come up casually in conversation, suggesting that news and culture from Galar's Pokémon League has spread to Kalos. One NPC mentions wanting to visit Galar to try Dynamaxing, hinting that the mechanic might appear in a future Legends game focused on that region. These forward-looking comments create anticipation while respecting ZA's focus on Lumiose and Mega Evolution. Photo mode contains its own hidden interactions. Certain music tracks influence how your Pokémon pose. Soothing tunes make them curl up and nap. Battle themes get them energized and ready for action. Upbeat songs prompt dancing animations. This mechanic works on some NPCs as well, including Mabel. The system rewards experimentation, encouraging players to discover which songs create which reactions, rather than explaining everything up front. Early in the game, you register your birthday at the Pokémon Center. On that date, when you visit the center, a short celebration plays. Confetti falls. Nurse. Joy delivers a heartfelt birthday message. It's a small touch, but it personalizes the experience in a way that makes the world feel responsive to you as an individual, rather than just a protagonist moving through a story. Across Lumiose, colorful screws appear in unexpected locations. Rhine Construction wants these screws to help with building projects. In exchange for collecting them, you receive Canary merchandise, small keyrings that provide bonuses to experience, money, and Mega Shard acquisition. There are more screws scattered around than keyrings available, but finding every single screw unlocks a secret reward. A large Canary plush appears in your Hotel Z bedroom, a piece of YouTuber merchandise that some players love and others find intrusive. The game doesn't force this on you. You have to seek out every screw deliberately to make it appear. During certain missions, the game tests whether you're paying attention to instructions. When NPCs form a human ladder to reach something high, jumping backward at the wrong moment breaks their formation. Corbeau will scold you, acknowledging that you disrupted their carefully planned cooperation. These small reactive moments show that developers anticipated player behavior, building responses for actions that technically break the intended flow. The Mega Evolution system itself contains layers of intentional design philosophy. Certain Mega forms carry logical inspirations that reveal themselves through observation. Mega Starmie allegedly seeks to surpass humanity, which explains why it takes on a more humanoid form. This detail isn't announced in obvious ways. It requires either reading obscure Pokédex entries or noticing the shape language in the design itself. The developers trust that some portion of the player base will dig deep enough to uncover these meanings, while others will simply appreciate the visual transformation without understanding the conceptual reasoning behind it. Elsewhere in Lumiose, photographs displayed in certain buildings hint at mysteries the game never fully explains. An image of Crobat suggests it lives in a Lumiose cave, despite not appearing in the regional Pokédex. Is this a pre-redevelopment sighting? Does the cave exist somewhere that players haven't discovered? The photograph raises questions without providing answers. Another picture shows Lapras in a pose reminiscent of the classic Loch Ness Monster photograph, playing on Lapras's mythical origins and connection to water-based cryptid legends. These images feel like conspiracy board material, inviting speculation about hidden locations or Pokémon that might appear under specific conditions. The Tower of Mastery receives its own exhibition space in the museum. Displays explain the history of Mega Evolution, describing how the first Megastone and Keystone were discovered. But as mentioned earlier, the exhibit's information conflicts with knowledge from other regions. Hoenn's Rayquaza Mega evolved without stones, suggesting the phenomenon existed long before Kalos formalized it. Mega Evolution's true origins remain debated within the game's world, with different regions claiming precedence. ZA doesn't settle this debate. It presents multiple perspectives and lets players decide what they believe. Near Wild Area 4, you can encounter NPCs who reference past games in unexpected contexts. One mentions the Skiddo waiting patiently at the train station, abandoned by their trainer. The story mirrors Hachiko, the legendary Japanese dog who waited at Shibuya Station for his deceased owner every day for years. Pokémon versions of this tale have appeared before, but seeing it referenced in Kalos adds emotional weight. The game acknowledges that loyalty and loss exist in this world, that not every trainer treats their Pokémon well, and that some bonds persist even when they shouldn't have to. The post-game content expands on ZA's commitment to hidden challenges. After unlocking 20 of the Infinite Royales, a secret side quest activates. You receive a message directing you to Hotel Richisime, where you participate in a tournament where Cynthia battles you repeatedly. Every contestant is her. It's a humorous setup that also serves as an endurance test, forcing you to face one of Pokemon's most iconic champions over and over. The rewards remain secret until you complete it. Another example of ZA trusting players to pursue challenges even without knowing what they'll receive. Certain NPCs drop hints about events or locations that might exist outside the main story. One mentions heading to the Glittering Cave, which appeared in X and Y as an area filled with gemstones and glowing moss. Another references the Kalos power plant, where Team Flare operations once took place. These aren't places you can visit in ZA, but their mention suggests they still exist somewhere beyond Lumiose's borders. The game's narrow geographic focus doesn't mean the rest of Kalos disappeared. It simply means this story takes place entirely within one city's transformation. A hiker in Lumiose attempts to sell you a Magikarp for an exorbitant price, then reveals he'll trade it for a Gyarados instead. This callback references Generation 1's Magikarp salesman aboard the SS Anne, continuing a joke that's persisted for nearly 3 decades. What does the hiker do with the Gyarados? The game never shows him again. The transaction exists purely as reference and comedy, playing on Magikarp's reputation as the most useless Pokémon until it evolves into something powerful. Missing No, the famous glitch from Generation 1, made an appearance in X and Y as an Easter egg. Players who entered a specific building's doorway at the right time would encounter a brief visual reference to the corrupted Pokémon. ZA doesn't include missing no directly, but NPCs mention glitches and strange occurrences in digital systems. With ZA's futuristic setting and emphasis on technology, some fans theorize that missing no could appear as an actual Pokémon, a glitch given form through Lumiose's advanced infrastructure. The game never confirms or denies this possibility, leaving room for speculation. Throughout your journey, the city itself becomes a character. Lumiose's radial layout, inspired by Paris, creates a sense of order and symmetry. The 5 prominent plazas serve as landmarks, each with distinct architecture and an atmosphere. The developers used this structure to guide exploration, ensuring players could orient themselves using visual cues rather than relying entirely on the map. This design philosophy respects player intelligence, trusting that given clear landmarks and logical layout, most people can navigate complex spaces without constant hand-holding. The wild zones scattered around Lumiose's outskirts serve as controlled wilderness within an urban environment. They represent the game's central theme, the question of how humans and Pokémon can coexist in cities. Rather than keeping nature separate, Lumiose incorporates it, creating spaces where wild Pokémon thrive alongside human infrastructure. This approach mirrors real-world urban ecology efforts, where cities attempt to maintain biodiversity and green spaces even as they grow denser and more developed. Certain Pokémon appear only in specific wild zones, their presence tied to environmental conditions that match their natural habitats. Water types cluster near rivers and canals. Grass types populate parks and gardens. Rock and ground types appear in construction areas where stone and earth remain exposed. The distribution feels logical rather than arbitrary. Another way ZA creates immersion through attention to ecological detail. Different Vivillon patterns spawn in different districts and wild zones, their wing designs reflecting local aesthetics. Collecting all patterns requires comprehensive exploration, pushing players to investigate every corner of Lumiose and its surroundings. The blue pattern Vivillon from the museum quest becomes just one piece of a larger collection challenge. Some players dedicate dozens of hours purely to completing this Pokédex subset, treating it as the game's ultimate scavenger hunt. Hidden throughout these zones, shiny Pokémon appear with the same rarity they've always maintained. ZA doesn't announce shinies with sparkles or unique encounter animations in the overworld. You have to notice the color difference yourself, relying on observation rather than audio-visual cues. This design choice increases difficulty, but also makes shiny encounters feel more organic, as if you genuinely spotted something rare rather than having the game point it out. Mega Shards, required for Mega Evolution, drop from various activities, but remain scarce enough to encourage strategic use. You can't Mega Evolve constantly. You need to choose when the transformation matters most. This resource management creates tension in difficult battles, forcing decisions about whether to save Mega Evolution for later or use it immediately to survive a challenging encounter. The system respects that Mega Evolution should feel special rather than routine. The Seed of Mastery, an item that maxes out a Pokémon's stats, carries potential significance beyond its mechanical function. Seeds play a major role in Pokémon mythology, particularly in stories about life energy and eternal power. The Eternal Flower bloomed from a seed. AZ's weapon drew power from life itself. Lysandra sought similar immortality. The Seed of Mastery might represent a purified or controlled version of that same concept, a way to enhance Pokémon through natural means rather than extraction and sacrifice. The game never explicitly makes this connection, but the thematic resonance exists for players who trace these narrative threads. Lysandra's 3,000-year lifespan parallels AZ's curse, suggesting the ultimate weapon's effect on its users persists across millennia. Why specifically 3,000 years? The game doesn't explain whether this duration holds mystical significance or simply represents how long the weapon's energy sustains life before depleting. AZ became mortal again after reuniting with Floette, implying that completing his purpose or finding redemption broke whatever force sustained him. Lysandra, having no such resolution, continues to exist in his extended state, his whitening eye marking him as someone who exists partially outside normal time. The Litwick side quest, exploring life force absorption, ties these themes together without preaching. By using a cute ghost-type Pokémon to examine the ethics of draining life energy, the game makes its point gently. The child isn't harmed, the Litwicken isn't evil, but the potential for harm exists, and understanding that potential helps us recognize why AZ's actions caused such devastation. The ultimate weapon was essentially a giant Litwick, absorbing life on a massive scale to power resurrection. Chandelure's mega evolution, with its single lit flame, becomes another piece of this symbolic puzzle. Why does only one flame burn while the other looks into the afterlife? Perhaps because Chandelure, as a fully evolved form of Litwick, has completed its journey of absorbing life energy. One flame burns with stolen life. The other acknowledges death, the natural counterpart to existence. Lysandra and AZ, caught between these states, embody that same duality. They exist but shouldn't. They endure but wish to rest. The game returns to these themes through environmental storytelling rather than exposition. Lysandra's ruined cafe stands as a memorial to his failure. Team Flare's laboratories lie abandoned, their research incomplete. The ultimate weapon chamber remains sealed, its technology too dangerous to preserve. Lumiose builds over these scars, literally covering the past with new construction. But the museum preserves memory, ensuring future generations understand what happened and why it must never repeat. AZ's hotel becomes his final monument. Designed as his resting place, it welcomed guests while its creator prepared for the end of his impossibly long life. When he passes, the hotel continues operating, a reminder that institutions outlive individuals. The game doesn't dwell on his death. It happens quietly between missions, acknowledged through dialogue and memorial services rather than dramatic cutscenes. This restraint feels appropriate. AZ spent 3,000 years seeking peace. When he finally achieved it, the world didn't need to make a spectacle of his departure. The Crown Tundra exhibit, though brief, references Calorex's story from Pokémon Sword and Shield's DLC. Records mention a Pokémon that spoke telepathically to ancient people, ruling through wisdom rather than force. Calorex's bond with its steeds, Glastrier and Spectrier, represented different aspects of leadership, endurance through harsh conditions versus freedom in spirit. These themes echo throughout ZA, where leaders must balance tradition with progress, where moving forward requires understanding what to preserve and what to change. Zygarde's presence in ZA deepens through scattered references rather than direct appearances. NPCs mention strange sightings in wild zones. Others discuss ecosystem balance and how certain areas recovered faster than expected after Team Flare's activities. Zygarde operates in the background, observing, waiting to intervene only if balance tips too far. Its 100% form represents total awareness achieved through countless individual cells working together. This concept mirrors Lumiose's redevelopment, where thousands of small decisions by citizens, planners, and Pokémon create something larger than any individual could achieve alone. The game's approach to legendary Pokémon overall leans toward restraint. Rather than forcing encounters with every legendary ever created, ZA focuses on those relevant to Kalos' story. Xerneas and Yveltal remain absent from the main narrative, their tale already told in X and Y. Zygarde's presence stays subtle. The game trusts that not every legendary needs a spotlight, that sometimes mythology serves the story better through reference and implication rather than direct confrontation. This philosophy extends to how ZA handles its connection to other regions. Rather than cramming in references to every Pokémon generation, the game selectively highlights moments that enrich Lumiose's story. The Hisui exhibition makes sense because Arceus predates ZA and establishes the Legends series formula. References to Black and White through Ingo and the Striaton triplets acknowledge important character arcs and beloved NPCs. Mentions of Galar and Paldea feel natural in a modernizing city where news and culture flow freely between regions. But ZA never loses sight of being a Kalos story. Every reference serves Lumiose's narrative rather than existing purely for nostalgia. This discipline prevents the game from becoming a theme park of Pokémon history, maintaining focus on its specific time and place while honoring the broader franchise. Walking the streets at night, when the city lights reflect off building facades and the minimap's color ring shifts to red, the atmosphere changes. Lumiose feels quieter, more contemplative. NPCs discuss different topics after dark. Some Pokémon only appear during specific hours. The day-night cycle isn't just cosmetic. It affects what you encounter and who you meet, encouraging multiple visits to the same locations at different times. Certain missions activate only during particular weather conditions. Rain brings water types into districts where they normally don't appear. Sunshine encourages grass types to emerge from parks into nearby streets. Snow, rare in Lumiose, transforms the city entirely when it arrives, coating everything in white and drawing out ice types that usually remain in distant wild zones. The game rewards players who return repeatedly, who understand that time and weather create new possibilities, rather than just providing aesthetic variety. Photo mode becomes a tool for discovery, beyond just taking pictures. By changing music and observing Pokémon reactions, you learn their preferences. Some species love battle themes, getting excited and aggressive. Others prefer gentle melodies, relaxing and showing contentment. A few respond to upbeat pop songs by dancing, their animations synchronized to rhythms. This system encourages experimentation, turning photo mode into a way of understanding Pokémon personality rather than just documenting their appearance. The birthday celebration mechanic, though simple, demonstrates ZA's attention to player experience. By registering your actual birthday and receiving acknowledgement on that date, the game creates a personal connection. Nurse Joy's message isn't generic. It references your trainer name and acknowledges that today matters specifically to you. For players who engage deeply with Pokémon games, these small touches transform the experience from playing a game to existing within a world that recognizes you. Collecting all the screws for rhyme construction becomes a meditation on exploration. The screws hide in obvious places and obscure corners equally. Some require solving environmental puzzles. Others sit in plain sight, testing whether you look carefully at every detail or rush through areas focused only on objectives. The Canary Plush reward polarizes players precisely because it's so visible. Once placed in your room, it dominates the space, a constant reminder of your completionism. Some players display it proudly. Others wish they could remove it, preferring Hotel Z's original minimalist aesthetic. The game doesn't judge either response. It simply provides the reward and lets you decide how you feel about it. This trust in player agency extends throughout ZA. Very few decisions are made for you. The game presents options, provides tools, and allows you to shape your journey according to your interests. Want to focus on competitive battles? The ZA Royale provides that challenge. Prefer collecting and completing the Pokédex? The Vivillum patterns and shiny hunting support that goal. Enjoy exploration and discovery. The Museum, hidden NPCs and scattered secrets reward thoroughness. This multi-threaded approach to content ensures different players find different aspects compelling. Someone might never complete the museum's Spupa quest, but spend hours perfecting their battle team. Another player might ignore competitive play entirely, focusing instead on photographing every Pokémon and in every pose the photo mode allows. ZA doesn't demand you engage with everything. It offers enough variety that everyone finds something that resonates. The Tower of Mastery's history, explored through museum exhibits and NPC dialogue, reveals how Mega Evolution research evolved over time. Early experiments happened in secret, with researchers uncertain whether temporary super evolution was possible. The discovery of keystones and megastones opened new possibilities, but also raised questions about whether forcing such transformations harmed Pokémon. Modern Mega Evolution, as practiced in ZA, includes safeguards and bonds between trainer and Pokémon that earlier attempts lacked. This progression mirrors real scientific development. Early exploration often proceeds through trial and error, sometimes causing harm before better understanding emerges. The tower itself transformed from research facility to gym to whatever role it serves in ZA, each iteration reflecting changing social needs and priorities. Buildings, like people and Pokémon, adapt to survive. Throughout all these layers, one truth persists. Pokémon Legends ZA rewards attention, patience, and curiosity. Rushing through the main story provides a satisfying experience, but lingering in Lumiose, speaking to every NPC, examining every display, testing every boundary, reveals a city built with remarkable care. The developers filled this relatively small map with more secrets than many games spread across vast open worlds. The density of content respects player time. You don't need to travel for hours to find interesting interactions. You need only to look carefully at what's already around you. This design philosophy creates a different kind of exploration, one based on observation rather than distance covered. Lumiose becomes a puzzle box, each secret discovered hinting at others still hidden, each answered question raising new ones. And so the city continues to surprise, even after you think you've seen everything. A conversation with a previously silent NPC unlocks new perspective on events. A weather pattern you haven't witnessed before brings out Pokémon you've never encountered. A mission that activates only after completing seemingly unrelated tasks reveals connections between disparate storylines. The museum remains the heart of this interconnected design. Every time you return, you notice details you missed before. A painting's description contains information relevant to a side quest you just accepted. An artifact's placard explains a mechanic you've been using without understanding its origins. The exhibits don't change, but your understanding deepens with each visit, transforming what initially seemed like simple displays into windows onto Pokémon history. Professor Laventon's faded portrait in the haunted Lumiose apartment carries special weight for Legends Arceus players. He was the character who gave you your starter, who believed in completing the Pokédex when others thought the task impossible. Finding his portrait hanging in a modern apartment, aged and mysterious, suggests his work persisted beyond his lifetime, that his dream of documenting every Pokémon continued through generations. The portrait doesn't tell you what happened to him. It simply shows that he was remembered, that his contribution mattered enough for someone to preserve his image. These quiet moments of continuity between games create emotional resonance beyond mechanics and battles. Pokemon has always been about connection between trainers and Pokemon, between players and the world, between past adventures and present experiences. ZA honors this tradition while pushing forward, showing that progress and memory don't oppose each other. You can embrace new technology while respecting old wisdom. You can rebuild cities while preserving their history. Lumiose's redevelopment project embodies this philosophy. The city expands its wild zones, creating more space for Pokemon to live naturally within urban boundaries. Historic buildings receive renovation rather than demolition, their facades maintained while interiors modernize. The skyline grows upward while the street level retains its character. Change happens gradually, deliberately, with consideration for what makes Lumiose special. The game asks whether we can do better than our predecessors without erasing what they built. AZ and Lysandra both made terrible mistakes in pursuit of good intentions. Their failures don't mean the intentions were wrong, they mean the methods were catastrophic. Modern Lumiose, learning from history, attempts to achieve harmony between humans and Pokemon through cooperation rather than dominance, through gradual transformation rather than violent upheaval. This message never becomes preachy because it's embedded in environment and mechanics rather than dialogue. You see the philosophy in action through every wild zone, every preserved building, every NPC discussing how the city has changed while maintaining its identity. The game trusts that experiencing these details will communicate more effectively than any speech could. Walking through the rebuilt districts, you notice how construction sites become gathering places. Pokemon that once avoided human structures now nest in scaffolding and half-finished buildings. Timber and girder work alongside human construction crews, their strength making projects possible that would otherwise require heavy machinery. This cooperation wasn't mandated. It emerged naturally once the city created conditions where working together made sense for both species. The philosophy extends to how wild Pokemon behave in urban spaces. Rather than fleeing at human approach, many simply continue their activities, acknowledging your presence without fear. They've learned that Lumiose's humans don't pose threats. The trust took time to build, NPCs explain, years of careful interaction and respect for Pokemon territories. Now, children play in parks where wild Pokemon graze. Cafes leave bowls of water and food outside for passing Pokemon. The boundaries between wild and domestic blur in ways that feel organic rather than forced. Certain Pokemon have become unofficial mascots of specific districts. A Meowstic always sits near the library, watching visitors come and go. A group of Furfrou gather in the fashion district, their grooming styles matching current trends. These aren't placed there by the game arbitrarily. NPCs reference these Pokemon by name, tell stories about how long they've been part of the neighborhood, describe their personalities and habits. The city lives through these details. Behind these observations lies careful attention to Pokemon ecology. Each species appears where it logically would based on habitat needs and behavior patterns. You don't find Magikarp in fountains unless those fountains connect to the city's canal system. Rock types don't randomly appear on paved streets but congregate near construction zones where stone and minerals remain exposed. The distribution rewards players who understand Pokemon biology, turning encounters into puzzles about where species would naturally thrive. Over time, you learn to predict spawns based on environmental clues. A district with many flowering plants will attract bug and grass types. Areas near the river host water and flying types. If you enjoyed drifting through these quiet facts, there's another video waiting on the left of your screen. Maybe let it play while you rest. You might learn something new before you drift off again.